joining me now is Ambassador Humphrey Ojiako, who discusses and gives us more about that visit. Ambassador Humphrey Ojiako, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Gloria, for inviting me.
Well, let's begin now by dissecting this all-important visit of the Nigeria's president to the U.S. How important is this at this point?
Actually, the summit visits at that level between presidents or heads of government is always a very important issue in relations between nations. The Nigeria and the United States have had a very long relationship, most of it friendly. Sometimes there have been hiccups, but mostly it's been a friendly relationship. So whenever our presidents, the presidents of the two countries, have the opportunity to meet and discuss with each other, it's usually a very useful thing. Yes, it is important. However, if I get your drift properly, it is the hysteria, the kind of excessive expectations that most Nigerians place on these trips. That's probably what may be a bit challenging. There is a point that excessive expectation from what any other country can do for us may be kind of hyperbolic. It is not possible for decisions that Washington takes in the White House, in the State Department, or decisions taken in Beijing, China, or Paris, or any other capital of the world would make as much difference in Nigeria as the decisions we Nigerians and our leadership take here in Nigeria to solve those challenges that we have. So you hear the words like help, assist, aid Nigeria to do this and that. Those are not words I like to use, even in my own diplomacy. I prefer words like cooperation, collaboration, partnership maybe, in areas where there's a harmony of interest, where our interests coincide with those of the United States. Certainly, we could work together with the United States to sort out those challenges, like the security issues. You will recall that Nigeria has been a major partner of the United States and, in fact, the international community, the United Nations, in monitoring and stabilizing the peace and security of our African continent, particularly the West African sub-region. That role is important to the international community. And any relationship between the United States and Nigeria that restores Nigeria's capacity to continue in that role certainly must be of interest to the United States and the rest of the world.
So how can the president use this visit to explore the opportunities here to benefit Nigeria?
You know, the president actually has a team of advisors and people who have traveled with him. Obviously, they brainstorm. His main responsibility on this trip, in my view, is to be able to persuade President Obama and his own cabinet that the interests of Nigeria in these areas I have mentioned, the security stability issues, the Boko Haram issues, these interests which Nigeria have in stopping Boko Haram now are in harmony with United States' ultimate interests in this our region. Once the president is able to achieve that, the rest of the technicalities for cooperating, for collaborating to sort out the issues of Boko Haram will be dealt with at a much lower technical, bureaucratic level, which is why I mentioned the Binational Commission, which already exists as a platform on which these things could be worked out.
Well, you see, this Binational Commission was set up under the last administration,
sure.
And right after that, we saw a divestment, from the U.S., against Nigeria, and then, of course, so many things just started going wrong. What really was the problem, in your opinion, between the last administration and the U.S.?
To be very frank, when the BNC was negotiated under President Yaradua and was signed, I think, in May 2010, It was hailed as a serious breakthrough.
Yes.
The first and most important foreign relations partnership between the United States and any other African country, including South Africa and Egypt at the time. So Nigeria was the first. And the BNC was negotiated at a very high level of government between the then Nigerian foreign minister and Mrs. Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State of the United States at the time. So it couldn't get any higher. So it was a serious platform. Now, there is this tendency in our system to reach agreements and then think that we have reached the destination. Agreements must be followed up. The platform still exists to the best of my understanding, but it has not been put to as much use as it should have been.
Are you saying there was no follow-up from the last administration?
Certainly there was a follow-up, but that follow-up couldn't have been enough, because if it were enough, some of the irritants in the relations between the United States and Nigeria, which led to certain difficulties that became obvious, probably could have been sorted out at that level.
What, in your opinion, were the initial irritants, according to you?
The United States was actually complaining about issues of human rights. And in my experience, Nigeria is a human rights conscious country. So it is possible, that's my view, because at the time these things were happening, I was acting in Geneva as the permanent representative of Nigeria, so I wasn't here. But I was following everything. And the fact was the United States needed to be made to understand the very circumstances under which the Nigerian armed and security forces were operating. A terrorist action is not an everyday thing people experience. So if you have to fight an asymmetrical war of that kind, there are a lot of different approaches to just sheer use of raw force. But when there's no alternative, and the country has to defend its territorial integrity and its sovereignty, then obviously bad things do happen in war. But it is not deliberate policy to breach the human rights of people. That was one of the many issues that was at variance. Some people have suggested that issues of LGBT, that's lesbian, gay rights, was also part of the... But this is where I think the mutuality of respect between countries is a cardinal aspect, cardinal point in diplomacy, in bilateral relations. Obviously, the United States ought to be made to understand that there are certain cultural issues, certain religious issues, which Nigerians could never compromise on, at least not at the level of development we have. So those, I think, were some of the issues which obviously will be sorted out now that we are re-engaging.
Interesting. It would be good to know how this would straighten out, given the fact that we're still having heightened security matters and insurgency is still going on unabated. And we're wondering what new strategy would there be, to assuage whatever the U.S. has in its head about Nigeria?
Actually, I think President Obama has come out openly to make certain promises and commitments. This time again, let us not look at it from the prism of assist us or help us. Let us look at it from the prism of cooperation and collaboration in our mutual interest. Because obviously President Buhari would have established to President Obama that it is both in our interest, the interest of our two countries, to stop Boko Haram. How do we stop Boko Haram? I think I heard Vice President Biden talk about other means in addition to use of force. Those other means could mean collaboration with the United States, interesting who backs Boko Haram, who funds Boko Haram, what are the paths their sources of supply follow, what are the channels, what are the avenues for supply and resupply. Because to sustain an operation the type Boko Haram is staging here, it cannot be a cheap enterprise.
True.
So how do they get their supplies? From what sources? Who supplies them? How do they get funded? What channels do those funds travel? What banks, if any, and so on? The United States is more technically, more technologically advanced than Nigeria. It certainly has a much larger capacity to find such information. And in a state of cooperation and collaboration, we could use that kind of information.
But we will come back to this, because most especially when we had such strong show of support from the U.S., especially when it came to the Chibok girls, the abduction of those Chibok girls, and how the U.S. promised, wholeheartedly to help. And at the end of the day, there was nothing to show for it. So it will be interesting to know your perspective on that. But we'll take a break right now. We're still with the former ambassador, permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Humphrey Ojiako. We'll be right back on these issues. Please stay with us.
There are three dimensions to visit. First, the aspect of security, stopping increasing cooperation on Boko Haram. Two, diversifying the base of our economy. President Buhari has always hinted his commitment to diversify the base of our economy by placing more emphasis on non-oil products. And so America is ready to assist us in that direction. The third one is to re-emphasize our commitment to the principles of democracy, human rights, rule of law, good governance, and the fight against corruption.